Hello, this is my first F1 podcast, and we're going to do a roundup of the season so far. We're in the August summer break right now. Give you a brief little insight to how the championship's looking, with Max in first, obviously, from the last 3 seasons. He's dominating as usual. He's on 277 points, with Norris in second, 199 points. He's the closest rival we have in the championship at the moment. Leclerc, third, 177. Piastri, fourth, 167. Fifth is Sainz with 162. Sixth is Hamilton, arguably the biggest climber, with 150 points. Seventh, surprisingly, Perez, with his drop in performance this year, barely even managing to finish in the points in a lot of races, and his qualifying performance being abysmal, to be honest. Eighth is Russell with 116 points. Ninth, Alonso with 49. The big gap there. But that is the Aston Martin for you. Big news coming with them soon, a lot of people think. And 10th is Stroll with 24 points, which is still 24 championship points, but nothing to write home about, really. Although, saying that, a lot of people, especially like Williams, would kill for those points. Speaking of constructors, we have Red Bull on 408 points and McLaren 366 and Ferrari 345. They're the closest to Red Bull, which arguably Perez is the one letting them down there. If they're getting them 1-2 finishes, they would be much, much further, that gap between McLaren and Ferrari. Mercedes, 100 points behind McLaren, 266 points. Aston Martin, 73 points. Almost a 200-point gap there. The RB, that's not Red Bull, that's RB, 34 points. Haas, 27. Big improvement for them this year. Alpine, 11. Williams, 4 points. And Sauber, shockingly, 0 points. So Max is 78 points ahead of Lando, which is only 3 wins ahead. If Max DNS from his temper tantrums a bit more, or any issues with the car for 2 or 3 races, and well, maybe even 1, and then Lando's right back in there. He's already up there right now, but it could also be a close 3-way fight for first, because Leclerc is only 22 points behind Lando. Consistency is key. Lewis is showing that with the big climber. He's 122 points behind Max, and that's only 5 race wins behind. If anyone can win races, he constantly proves that he can do it. But McLaren are the ones chasing, which is nice to see. Since Lewis left, they've not really had arguably a proper championship run. So it's nice that it's not just one. It's nice that it's Lando and Oscar up there in the top 2 chasing. They need to choose a first driver, because it's late in the season now, but we'll get to that. And Mercedes may have found their pace with recent wins. Arguably Ferrari are losing ground, or Mercedes have just managed to claw back the performance they've lost. I am a Mercedes fan, so through this podcast you might think I'm a little bit biased. I apologise for that in advance, but everybody's a fan of somebody. So the big question is, why have Red Bull dropped off the pace? Is it that they've dropped off the pace? There's a lot of recent theories around the recent news in the summer break, which was, if you don't know, some recent rule changes have brought in the effect of asymmetric braking being banned. And for anyone who's not sure, I'm not entirely sure myself. So I read a little bit on it, and as far as I can see, asymmetric braking is a way of being able to alter the balance of braking in the rear wheels that go through the corner. So if you're going through a fast left corner, you can have the inner left wheel brake harder than the outer right wheel. That's what I gather from it. I could be completely wrong there, I'm not sure. I'll have to read up on that. Probably should have read on it first before doing the podcast, but there we go. Anyway, some recent theories saying that rule change of asymmetric braking system being banned is now why Red Bull have lost a lot of pace. Others saying Adrian Newey leaving and he's taking something off the car, which I think is a bit silly. I think it's a daft theory. I don't think it's a theory that holds any weight to it. Adrian Newey, he's a designer of the car. He's not like he puts like a police scanner on it or something like that and takes it off and they lose performance. It's just not what it is. I don't think that theory holds any weight. The other theory, which does hold some weight, is because of Adrian leaving, they've begun starting the work on next year's car already. They've abandoned this year's car, stopped upgrading, and look into next year's car already. This holds ground to it because they've lost their main designer. Arguably the person who's won them the last 3 constructors, including this year. So they now are in panic stations a little bit because they owe their success to him. Yeah, Max did a big part as well, but without the designer of that car giving that edge, then they now have to find another designer that's going to create as good of a car because nobody wants to drop off. Your team finishes first, you want to finish first next year. And I think that holds weight to it. It makes sense. They would need to start preparing next year's car as soon as they can. But they're definitely lacking in corners compared to the beginning of the season. They definitely dropped off. I mean, the other theory is the competitors could genuinely be getting stronger. They could have caught up. McLaren have been developing a better car. We've seen in recent races, they're there. They're back with Red Bull. They're challenging, and not just challenging, they're getting pole positions, they're getting race wins. Team-wise, they're not making the best of choices, but Mercedes are there as well. So it could be that other teams are now catching up. Max did say he was surprised they didn't catch up earlier. I mean, it's unfair not to mention Ferrari, because Ferrari, since recent years, they've definitely put in the work and caught up. So, yeah. But one of the telling things is Max being angry, his recent rants. I love it in 2 ways. I love it because I'm not a fan of his, but I also love it because it shows his passion. Yeah, I may not be a fan of his, but it's great to see passion. Some people have said they think it's a bit spoiled the way he complains and argues and shouts at his team. I personally don't think you should shout at your team over anything like that. There's so many thousands of people that work hard to bring a car to the track, and it must be disheartening for the team to hear their driver not only curse about it all the time when it's winning the races, but also swear at your engineers all the time, and it's not very nice. If you're Aston Martin and the drivers are saying the cars are bad, the cars are bad. It makes sense why the drivers are then saying that. But yeah, I do think Max could benefit from a bit of maturing in that area, but it is him. It's how he is. We maybe just have to accept that. 5 wins for Max though this season so far is great. You can't knock that achievement. It's not a joke. Some say it's the car, it may be, but still, 5 wins so far this season is 5 wins. Don't get me wrong, I'm enjoying that other people are winning, and it's much better to see other people on the podium again. But we're also seeing Red Bull back to complaining, opening more investigations again. Recently, they opened one against Mercedes, and that tells you they're under pressure for the first time in a little while. Personally, I don't think they need to be playing those games. I think it's needless. Childish came to mind then, but I don't think it's childish. I think it's just needless. They don't need to play those games. It's beneath them at this point. They keep focusing and keep doing what they're doing. There's no reason that they can't maintain where they are in the championship. But yeah, it's more of a question from now to see where they go in the season going forward. If it's another few races and the car's peaked its potential, then I think they're definitely working on next year's car in a bit of a, not desperation, but in the hopes to create as good a car as they can. Because if they're not careful, with Adrian Newey leaving, whatever team he goes to next year, let's say he goes to Aston Martin, I reckon it'll be Mercedes, McLaren, and Aston Martin up in the top three. Yes, I know Lewis is going to Ferrari, but I don't see Lewis making any massive dents in the first year at Ferrari. If he does, it'll be amazing, and I'll love it because I'm a Lewis fan. That would be awesome. But new team, new ways of doing stuff, new policies, new car, everything is different. And it's the first time he's ever moved to a team that's outside of the UK as well. New language, new cultures, because the British are very subdued in a way. So it's going to be very different for him. I won't be surprised if he gets a race win, because the car this year is there. If he was there this year, we might have seen more wins for Ferrari, because there's been some team calls that I think the experience of Lewis he would have sorted out. But yeah, if Red Bull don't get their act together creating next year's car, it's going to be McLaren, Ferrari, Aston Martin if Newey goes there, because Newey could pull it out of the bag. He could create a car that's amazing. But yeah, I think personally why Red Bull have dropped off, it's something about this rule change. It's something about the asymmetric braking system, because there's no way that the car goes from the beginning of the season to being 20 seconds a lap quicker. Well, sorry, not 20 seconds a lap, but a 20-second lap lead by the end of the race, where he gets a free pit stop in hand every race, and now struggling to get fourth, struggling to catch the Mercedes. But yeah. On a quick side note though, does anyone, I'm saying like some people can answer me, but do you remember when Mercedes brought out the zero pod design, the huge tunnels it had on either side of the driver's head? And then this year, we see Red Bull at the beginning of the year with the huge tunnels at the side of the head. It reminded me of this. Hang on, find some comparison for you. There's what I'm talking about with the tunnels at the side of the head, just lead down from the halo. And then we've got the Red Bull. Yeah, the Red Bull is a lot more pronounced, but maybe. And yeah, they've kept the side pods obviously, but it just reminds me of the Mercedes all the time. You can't see my mouse there, but I'm just trailing the outer edge. But it just reminds me of that all the time. I mean, did Mercedes catch on to something and they didn't really realise, or did Newey kind of see it and think? Because also at the beginning, don't forget, the Red Bull has at the front, where the halo meets the tunnels, it has air inlets there, so the engine is actually getting extra cooling. So maybe Newey saw it and thought, oh, that's a good way to get extra cooling actually. But also, if you look at how it compares now, so we've got the Mercedes and Red Bull very similar in tunnel design, except the Mercedes still doesn't have the inlets there. So there's got no extra air cooling, so it must purely be aerodynamics. But that's just me. I love aerodynamics, and it's something that I always look to every time I see these cars. But if you look now, the Red Bull looks very different. It doesn't have these huge tunnels at the side anymore. So I don't have a recent picture, but it looks very different. Yeah, just thought that was interesting. So I just wanted to bring that up. Maybe they saw something, wanted to make it work. Maybe they didn't. But maybe they've got the bigger tunnels because there's extra parts they want to. Like maybe it was the asymmetric braking, because that might be why they've changed the car back so it doesn't have them huge tunnels anymore. Because the recent Red Bull car doesn't have that now. So it could be that. But it's anyone's guess. It's I mean, with F1 cars, there's nothing on the car that's not there. Absolutely has to be there. So if it's there for a reason. And if they had those huge tunnels there to make room for something, then and that's why the huge tunnels aren't there anymore, then something was there. But it is surprising that the Red Bull is not where it should be in the high speed corners. With the aero giants that they are, that car has always been, how to say, different aerodynamics wise. So in the 2021 era, where there was the aero was much different. The aero was the car that you see before you're on the background, where the front wings were allowed to be so different, and it was a very different car. The Red Bull changed completely and ran a much higher rake than the other cars. All the other cars ran dead low and flat to the ground, but where Red Bull ran dead high. So it's surprising that they're suffering in the high speed corners. And that's where you see the McLaren starting to close that gap. But yeah, thing is though, what's different is it's no longer, because the competition is closing. It's no longer the big gains that can make a difference. You've got, so in the old aero days, you could add stuff to the car, and if it worked, brilliant. You just kept doing it, kept adding stuff, and that was it. Whereas now with the cost cap and the wind tunnel time restrictions and things like that, you have upgrades to bring, and if they don't work, it's back to the drawing board. And teams are finding this. Ferrari, that's why they've dropped off the pace recently. They brought upgrades and they didn't work how they intended. So they've dropped off the pace. But that all eats into the cost cap. So Red Bull now need to find those gains from somewhere. And it's more like the temps, like 0.1 or 0.3 here, which can be the smallest of changes. It's setup changes. It's getting a better start over the drivers. It's driver talent. It's awareness, it's getting a good night's sleep, which could have been it. We all know about how, sorry, I'm just going to drink some water. How he did an all night, I'm going to say he, sorry, I mean Max, he did an all night stream for a game. Like, to me, that's silly. You're a professionally paid athlete doing one of the world's most dangerous sports. Yeah, for me, you should be getting your sleep. But yeah, I think they are definitely working on next year's car now. Move that point aside because we'll focus on more on the car. But with Nui leaving, it's got to have forced him to the drawing board early, and it makes sense. Like, you've got a strong start for this year's car, so take your chances. At the beginning of the season, it was 20 seconds ahead of the field, and now they've got a fight on their hands. Easily got a fight on their hands. So maybe they're thinking we'll just get as much of a lead as can, and then we'll fight out through the season and still win. Maybe they didn't expect the others to catch him as they did. Max expected them to catch him a lot quicker. I remember him saying that in the press conference, so I don't think it was that. But yeah, maybe. It's a bit of a sore subject, but I do want to go back to the asymmetric braking system. It's just been banned. And I want to go back to it because usually when an innovation like this is banned, we are already aware of it being used. And I say this in the way of, I'll use Mercedes as an example because they've got a very well-known one, an obvious one, and it was the DAS system. Don't actually know what DAS stands for, but basically it was a system where they would have a, want of a better word, button on the steering wheel, and they could move the steering wheel in or out, which would change the toe of the front wheels, which would allow them to heat the front wheels up better. And it was very innovative and a very crafty but intelligent way of warming your front tyres up. Because with no tyre blankets being in sport anymore, very advantageous. You got warmer wheels, you go through the corners faster because your wheels are going to stick to the track better. But it wasn't cheating. A lot of people think it was cheating, and it wasn't. It was a grey area in the rules which allowed them to get heat into the tyres in a unique way. The long and short of it. But it wasn't cheating. Mercedes from the start gave all the blueprints to the FIA. Red Bull complained to the FIA numerous times about this, and Mercedes gave them all the schematics and the blueprints. And yeah, I'd still believe a lot of it was because of Red Bull complaining and opening investigations to the FIA. A lot of the Drive to Survive viewers will remember Christian Horner having a chat with Toto, saying that they are going to report it. And the FIA said they found it not to be cheating, but it deemed it was to be banned as it gained an unfair advantage over other teams, which they said in the way that other teams may not have the funds to develop such systems. That was one of the quotes. So again, Mercedes weren't cheating. It didn't game them. After the investigation, the FIA deemed it didn't give them any like extreme time games over anyone else. It wasn't the reason they were winning races. That's an important factor to remember. So they deemed it wasn't cheating, but it gained an unfair advantage, and that's why it was banned. So, that was a while ago. But the point I'm making is an innovation like that being banned, we were aware of it and we knew which team was using it and how it advantaged the car and what it did. In this case, though, it's a very big surprise. Out of nowhere, the FIA just said asymmetric braking is now banned, with no other information as to which team is using it, just that it's banned. And the key word there saying now banned. So somebody's been using it, and somebody has been getting advantages from it, but we don't know who, what team, which drivers, or anything. So it's very strange. But yeah, it's just weird that we don't know. With Red Bull being a team that's dropped off the pace so much, a lot of people are speculating that they're the ones that are using it, which would make sense. Something like that, I can see it gaining massive time around the track. It'll allow you to go much quicker into a corner while still braking. And we have seen that the Red Bull, sorry, I keep saying the Red Bull, Max's car, because let's not forget that Perez's car is nowhere near the same pace as Max's. But we've seen it where he locks a wheel into the corner, but we've also seen his dive bombs, so that's another story for a different day. But with the with Max's car dropping out the pace so much, a lot of people speculate that Red Bull are the ones that are using it. And they are saying, a lot of people are saying they're the ones that are cheating, but without knowing the full ins and outs of what asymmetric braking systems are, we're never going to truly know if that was the case or not. And with the current FAA we have at the moment, which seem to prefer withholding a lot of information and just making certain bits of information clear, I don't think we'll ever know. We might find out in a few years, but when the dash system was banned, it didn't affect how quick Mercedes were, and they didn't drop in performance. It wasn't a resulting factor which made Mercedes win. It was just something that helped Mercedes heat their tyres up. It wasn't a significant contributing factor. So whichever team was using asymmetric braking, if it was Red Bull, it was obviously significant. But you could put that down to Red Bull's dominance as well. If it was used in the last few years, we don't know. If it was, then it brings up the legitimacy of Max's championship titles back into question, which is unfair, mainly as it's in the past already happened. He's the championship driver that we have, and we can't change that. You can't. It's much better for the sport if, like good or bad, if you just accept it and move on. Even 2021, the season and the corruption, whatever happened, Michael Massey, a lot of people disagree with it. Like it or not, though, it was good for the sport. So even if it does bring legitimacy into question, you can't change the decisions that have happened in the past. You can't change past results. It's unfair and it shouldn't happen. Like I say, like it or not, it brings more people to the sport. 2021 was one of the best seasons that has been around for F1. I thoroughly enjoyed the season, even though for me the wrong person won. But it brought so many more fans to the sport. We may never know the true events of the seasons, but like I say, it's better for the sport. And I'd hate to bring up the legitimacy of someone in the sport. It's one of those age-old things. Bringing up the legitimacy of a driver, it's you're questioning their integrity and them as a person. It feels like, and it's unfair to do so. Yeah, he's got a fast car and stuff, but he's still the one winning championships, and he's still incredibly talented. He's our championship driver at the moment. He chose number one. A lot of people disagree with it, but it is what it is. Moving on to McLaren. Starting of the season, it's safe to say they got a strong car. It's not a bad car, and it's a definitely good starting platform, and it's proving to get better with the upgrades they're bringing. Unlike Ferrari, the upgrades that Ferrari brought didn't quite work out. McLaren's dominance has been shadowed by Red Bull, or Red Bull's dominance has shadowed McLaren, should I say. But now that Red Bull's been reined in a bit, we're seeing how good that McLaren is. Sorry, I was taking a drink. The McLaren seems to be a bit of an all-rounder. Each track we go to. I mean, there was a couple of tracks, I can't remember. They didn't do too well at Britain. Mercedes did better than, well, Mercedes surprised everyone at British Grand Prix. But McLaren definitely have a strong base car to start with at the beginning of the season, and they're in a great spot now as they're developing a strong car and getting good results. However, it's sadly being overshadowed by the key decisions that no doubt will hurt them later on in the season, because we've seen it so many times. It doesn't matter if it's the start of the season, quarter of the way through the season, or 3/4 of the way through the season. Silly mistakes and bad team decisions can hurt you in a championship contender. Like, if you're trying to fight Max, every point is crucial. So not letting Lando pass Oscar for the win, regardless of who you're cheering for, that doesn't come into it. It's a huge mistake down the line. If Lando is in second fighting Max for the championship now, and he loses by 1 point, or by 3 points, or 4 points, it will come back to that time where McLaren now should have definitely let Oscar or be overtaken by Lando. They need to change what they're doing, and we've seen mistakes like this lose championships. Like I say, if Lando loses the championship by 1 point, that's the pivotal moment that cost him. So I don't understand why McLaren, being as an experienced team as they are, let's not forget McLaren have won titles. Lewis won his first championship there. They've had difficult times and they've had great times. You would think out of all people would know it's for the championship. Lando is leading Oscar in the championship, so by principle you would say, look, it's not about being a first, second driver. Lando is leading the championship. We need to support him and chase that. See the bigger picture down the road, and there's a long way to go in catching Max. Every point counts. He could be up to 180 points by now, easily. But yeah, it's frustrating. the McLaren car has definitely been inspired by Red Bull, but I think they've definitely only been inspired. I wouldn't say they've copied it. Like last year's RB is now the last year's Red Bull is now the current RB, which was true to a point, but I think RB have been told, here's the base of it and make your own car, and they've not done very well. But McLaren have definitely been inspired, which is great because that's what the sport is about. It's about looking at what succeeds, taking it, and developing it in your own way from there. And it's working for McLaren. Whatever they're doing to that car is great, but they definitely having some team issues at the moment. They need to decide who their first driver is. And I think at the moment they're avoiding that because they don't want to offend either driver. And it's not about offending them, it's about realizing what your team goal is and chasing that. And right now, that team goal should be chasing Max down for the championship. So for me, they should be pushing Lando. They should have let Lando pass Oscar, and that's it. Lando should have won the race, and they should be chasing Max down because we're only halfway through the season. This is a review of the year so far. This is halfway point. Like, if Lando keeps it up, it could be a tight finish for the last race. Like, it could come down to the last race. McLaren need to realise that and see the bigger picture. So, for me, McLaren are looking the strongest team at the moment. And they're the team that has the most potential to win the championship. Maybe even the constructors, because Perez is letting Red Bull down. Whatever's happening there, they don't have the same car. And it's really showing and hurting. And with Perez not finishing up there with Max, the constructors' title is right there for the grabbing. And then we come to Ferrari. It's it always seems difficult with Ferrari. It shouldn't be either. Ferrari are one of the leading, like, founding farmers in F1. They're like a founding father of F1. They've been in it since the start. And they still keep making mistakes. Mercedes are overtaking Ferrari now, and they have no business doing that considering how bad Mercedes have been of late. I mean, yeah, Mercedes are getting the car together now, but in recent races, you would say it's Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari. Red Bull, McLaren, Mercedes, Ferrari. And it shouldn't be that. Mercedes should be the fourth team. But yeah, they've swapped with Mercedes now and they're below. I'd say Ferrari the fourth strongest team now, especially strategy-wise. Car-wise, after the recent updates, they seem to be struggling now as well, which they've gone backwards. But this is where we come to the nature of the regulations not suiting them again at the moment. The wind tunnel restrictions and the budget cap limiting their ability to create a good car and maintaining a good car. Let's not forget they're now climbing their way back up to the top really after years of suffering from the fuel penalty after being caught cheating. It was a while ago, but Ferrari were caught cheating, and part of the punishment along with the fines and whatnot was that they got given less fuel than everyone else at races to set an example on why you shouldn't cheat. If I remember rightly, it had something to do with the fuel pressure regulator that allowed them to push harder and longer in the races, giving a lot more pace. It was definitely something with the fuel pressure regulators. That's why now all fuel pressure regs are FAA standard and given to the teams. They're not developed by the teams anymore. But for a while, Ferrari suffered from that penalty, and they never really got back up into the points. And now you could argue they're getting there. They've got two decent drivers. Next year, still two decent drivers. But whatever updates they recently brought has brought them back down again, which is frustrating. But it's nice to see the Ferrari getting back up there. But like I say, maybe they're spending that too much time in the wind tunnel, too much time on the budget cap researching. Because let's not forget these regulations now. You can't, like in the pre-2021 days, whack things onto your car and spend as much money as you can. You have to spend money researching, developing and manufacturing, paying all of the staff to do this, and then when you put it on the car and it doesn't work after paying for all those materials as well, you're right back to the drawing board and paying more, but you can't pay too much more because of the budget cap. And you can't test it too much because of wind tunnel restrictions. And the wind tunnels are only open through certain times of the year. The new regulations on upgrades aren't as fluid as they used to be, especially the new ground effect cars. I mean, yeah, ground effect is old technology, but it's very new to the teams of today in a way, because ground effect back in the day, I mean, we had crazy aerodynamics back in the day. You had massive fans that sucked the cars down to the floor and things like that. The ground effect of today is much more different, and it's all about getting your aerodynamics right and the floor of the cars right. And that's why we see in the races now, if the floor damage, the cars are pretty much screwed. I kind of missed the 2021 days because we got so many interesting innovations. But it did mean that the top teams were lacking. They could just plonk more bits on, and if it worked, great. If not, spend more money on trying to get more speed somewhere else and research more. But I do like how the new regulations wind that in a little bit. If you spend a lot of your budget on researching parts and they don't really work, then you start to suffer like Ferrari are doing, because you can't now just spend more and bring in a lot more parts until you're now quick. It's a way for lower teams to get with the higher teams, because the lower teams, don't forget, have more wind tunnel time. So the higher you finish in the Constructors' Championship standings, the less wind tunnel time you have. Which also I think should have been a penalty for Red Bull, but it's another story. But yeah, I think the upgrades haven't worked for Ferrari and they're playing catch up again, which must be frustrating for the drivers. I think Mercedes hold an advantage there because they've spent the last 3 years with a terrible car learning why it was terrible. So in a way, they've had 3 years of research. And Mercedes said right from the start when the car was bad, they're not going to pop upgrades on and hope for the best. They're not going to put something on for the sake of trying to be quick as soon as they can. They're going to research where they're doing terrible and then try upgrades. It's, like I say, it's a great way the cost cap is affecting the sport. You'd get teams like Ferrari and Mercedes spending millions putting upgrades into the cars to be competitive. Whereas obviously Ferrari now can't do that. It brings the teams closer together. And we're seeing that. Williams now in the Constructors' Championship points. Haas are getting up there. Haas are having an amazing season, getting very valuable championship points. And don't forget, Constructors' points, each point is money for the team. So it's working. What F1 is doing is working. It's real benefit. And it's how the cost cap is intended to work. Ferrari still have a long way to go before the championship winning team, don't get me wrong. They've got a lot of work to do, especially team management wise. This year they seem better. Last year they had a nightmare. I mean, some of the team choices they were making were terrible. This year, you could argue some are just as bad, but they have been better. Lewis could be a great thing for them. A lot of people said the same when he went to Mercedes. Everyone was saying it's going to be a terrible move for him, and he doesn't know what he's doing. It's going to be terrible. And let's not forget, he came from a team that was struggling. McLaren were doing terrible, especially when they had the Honda engine partnership. And a lot of people are thinking that he's going to a team that's struggling, but he made history at Mercedes. He could do it again. It's got all the makings of a dream team, especially if Adrian Newey goes to Ferrari, because we still don't know where Adrian Newey is going. I hope he's going to Ferrari. That would be amazing. But a lot of people think it's Aston Martin, and the evidence is starting to add up that it's going to Aston Martin. Let's not forget he was looking for a house in the area of the Aston Martin base. I think it was Oxford, maybe was it? I can't remember. I could be wrong there. I don't know where it was, but yeah, there's a lot of evidence suggesting that. But Adrian Newey has always said he wanted to work with Lewis, so we'll see what happens. But as of recent, there's strong rumours he's going to Aston Martin, which wouldn't surprise me. Lawrence Stroll will do anything he can and throw as much money as he needs to Adrian to get him to go to Aston Martin, which out of some of the F1 teams there is, you could argue Aston Martin is the one of the most failing teams on the grid. It surprises me that Alonso has not left yet, which again you could say is more evidence to Adrian Newey moving to Aston, because Alonso is a world champion and they don't like losing. Alonso wants to win. You can see it in him. But I digress. That's a whole new topic, and I've got sidestepped from the topic of Ferrari. They're having a good season. They started off strong, especially strong with Mercedes not doing so great. But again, decisions like silly tyre choices and when it's raining and things like that, they need to sort that out. They can't keep doing that. It won't be a championship winning team until they sort those issues out. Until that's sorted, then I think we can see them being 1-2. I see Lewis sorting a lot of these problems out because he has that experience. He's been there. Let's not forget how old he is and how long he's been in the sport now. He's made the stupid decisions himself. He's had to overstep what teams tell him to do. He's gone against what teams say and stuff like this. So I think he has that experience in him and the leadership in him now to probably take Ferrari where it needs to be. Can Lewis win with Ferrari? If Newey goes there, definitely. If not, not in the first year of him moving there. But I don't know. That one is more of one with time to tell. I don't see Ferrari winning the Constructors this year or the Drivers' Championship. I think Ferrari at best will come third. And that's if they get their act together. Or I don't see them getting any higher than third this year. And this team I'm going to speak about because of the recent news, Alpine. Another team principal has stepped down. And it's not right. Like, F1 is not football. You don't change your managers every time you don't get a result you don't expect. You need that stability within the team, because don't forget, these team principals aren't just there each weekend on a Sunday just to tell the drivers what to do. They are in control of the factories, they're in control of the research, where the car needs to be, the sponsor obligations, and keeping sponsors happy, and everything. These team principals are a key part of the team. You keep changing them, the stability of the team goes down. So something isn't right within that team. They've always been a strong mid-pack team. And yeah, they've got the Renault supply engine, it may not be as good as it used to be. But there's a bigger issue to me. The car itself is not as strong as you can see when it's on track. It's not as grounded as it used to be. Ex-staff Luca De Meo, the boss, interfering. You got comments from Alan Prost saying that the top people in their team think they're better than they are. That's a huge problem. Like, yeah, if you've got them problems within the team and it stays within the team, that's not too bad. But when other people are involved saying it about the team, that's an issue. It's showing there's unrest within the team, and it's not good. Flavio Briatore is coming back, but it's a long way from the team it used to be, isn't it? They used to be a solid mid-pack team and even stole victories now and then. Like, they had no business winning sometimes, and that kind of thing doesn't happen by accident. People say, oh, it's luck and stuff like that. But in this kind of sport, you make your own luck. It's not something that's handed to you. Lewis winning on three wheels at Silverstone, it's not luck. He built that gap in that Grand Prix. And for me, it was something with tyre pressure that Mercedes did that weekend because Bottas had the same issue. Lewis had the same issue. So they must have. The tyre pressures on that tyre mustn't have been good. They must have pushed it a little bit too far and the tyre can't last as long as it should. Red Bull used to do this, that's why now Pirelli monitor the pressures and the teams aren't allowed to monitor the pressures anymore. It was at, not Jeddah, what's the other street track that we have? It was the other street track we used to have. Not that we used to, we still have it. I can't remember what it is. It's not Jeddah. It's the street track with the long straights and the castle section in it. I can't remember what it's called for the life of me. But you all remember Max Verstappen had a puncture on the high-speed straight there, and that was actually due to Red Bull increasing the pressures beyond the recommendations of Pirelli. So Pirelli now monitor, and this has been in effect for a while. I think that puncture was before maybe 21 or in the 21 season, so it's nothing new. But yeah, they were stealing victories. That was a massive side tangent, by the way. I don't know where that came from. But yeah, you make your own luck. And oh yeah, that's where the tangent came from. Lewis built that lead and the puncture happened and he managed to win because of the lead he built. So when they used to be stealing victories, it wasn't luck. They got themselves in that position. They got a strong car and good drivers. They still have good drivers. They're not bad drivers. It's just something is wrong within that team. I'm not a fan of the team itself personally, more in the sense that it's non-existent. And I don't mean that in a bad way, I just mean in the way that when you watch the race on a Sunday, you never notice them. You never think, oh, where are they? How are they doing? The only time you see them is when they're fighting each other needlessly. Or Ocon has a crash or something, you know what I mean? For me, I'm never looking at them through the pack. And to be honest, teammates in that team fighting, ridiculous. If you were fighting for top 10 position, I get it. But they're not. And they're not fighting for championship points. It's ridiculous. Management needs to step in at that point and say, you're ahead or you're ahead. There's no need for management to let this go on. Keep the cars on track. Do not fight. We need the points. Work together to get in the points. I don't understand why them two are fighting each other so much. But instead of stopping it, the management are letting it happen. It's damaging the morale in the team. Because we've heard the radio causing Ocon to lose his cool, and it's causing friction. It's doing more bad than good. But if the team stepped in, it'd be alright. For me, there needs to be a first and second with a clear gap to your competitor before you can fight it out. Like, if you're fighting for the win, go for it. If it's not going to cost you second or first, fight. But when you're out of the points and the cars are at stake, because every time you damage a car, that comes out of the cost cap, and it's not cheap to replace them. So there's no need for the fighting going on. But they need to get a grip of the drivers, I think. And I think both are as bad as each other. The management should be getting in control of that and sorting it out. But something is definitely wrong at Alpine. I think changes need to happen, but I think they're making the wrong changes. They need stability in a team principle, and they need to make changes elsewhere. But F1 in itself, let's not forget we have Audi coming to the sport, and I thought this was going to be great. I thought it was amazing. Another 2 cars on track to fill the grid. 2 more drivers that can come into the sport. and hopefully a woman driver, because there's no reason a woman can't take the seat, like Sophia Flörsch. I don't know if that's how you say her name. I probably butchered that, but because F1 needs more more cars on the grid. It's a lot more exciting. It gives fans a lot more to watch. I mean, if you did that, you would maybe have to increase the points paying positions from 10th to like maybe 12th or 14th because there'd be more cars on the grid. But that's what we need. And I was excited thinking Audi was going to be an extra team. But then they announced there wouldn't be extra cars on the grid. And they're just rebranding another team. And it annoys me seeing these car reveals on Instagram because the car will have a shadow of what it looked like the year before. Because Audi will use the car of the team they're taking over and build the most competitive car they can off all the data of the previous car from the year before. So whatever car 2025 is, Audi will use that in 2026 as a base and try to be as competitive as that off they can. So every time I see these car reveals on Instagram of the Audi 2026 car, it annoys the hell out of me. Nobody knows what it's going to look like. Nobody knows what the livery will be. And I'm still annoyed that it's not going to be an extra team on the grid. They're just rebranding. So, yeah, it's very disappointing. Which brings me to the next point. Audi boldly say they'll be fighting for the championship. And I think that's a very unrealistic thing to say. It's a big claim that the first 2 seasons, if they survive the first in F1, will be them trying to find their feet and trying to keep their sponsorship deals because F1 is cutthroat. You need obscene amounts of money to not only be in F1 but to stay in it. So if they have a terrible first season, their sponsors are going to say, yeah, bye. There will be a lot of their sponsors that signed for 1 year. And that will be sort of like we'll see how you do. Because sponsors don't care if your name's Audi. Sponsors don't care if your name's Mercedes or Red Bull or McLaren. If you're not up there and people don't see their sponsor on the side of your car because the camera's focused on Ferrari or Red Bull at the front, they're not going to pay for you. They're going to end that 1 year contract, move to Red Bull and say, we'll give you this much to have our name on the side of your car. That's how it works. So if Audi don't win in the first season or come in the top 10 all season and finish 14th all season, half of their sponsors are going to go, which means the second year is going to be incredibly hard for them. But time will tell. I think they're being very bold saying they're going to win. Yeah. Look at what is now Mercedes when Jensen's Button started in that new team, Braun GP. Because Braun GP was Mercedes, but had barely any sponsors on that car when it first came out. And that's because sponsors didn't want to pay for what they thought was not going to be a successful car. And yeah, if Braun GP hadn't have done surprisingly good in that season, it wouldn't be Mercedes. But looking down the rest of the season, I think personally we're just getting started. It's been a slow burner with the usual max dominance that we've seen of recent, but since the Red Bull has arguably suspiciously lost pace, the season is starting to ramp up, especially with, well, 3 teams catching, because I think Ferrari is still catching. You got McLaren, Mercedes, and Ferrari still catching in that order, which is weird because I don't think Mercedes were going to be anywhere up there this year, but it's nice. McLaren need to choose a first driver now before it's too late. The earlier they say Oscar or Lando, you're our first driver, and we're going to back you now because we realise the title is more important. Logically, you would pick Lando at this time because he's closest to the max in the standings and he's second in the championship. The sooner they back him and say, look, Oscar, we need a bit of teamwork now, and it's not about who is first or second in the drivers out of you. We just want to win the championship. The sooner they do that, the better for McLaren itself. we're halfway through now, so any mistakes are crucial. You need to get every point you can and make every race count, especially if you're not only going to catch Max but have a chance to beat him. The off the pace Red Bull in recent races proves or goes on to say that Max is going to struggle for the rest of the year. Especially the other teams still developing. I think there could be a 3 or 4 way fight for the championship. Unless the car magically finds pace in the summer break, I see other teams still closing that gap. And I think teams like McLaren are going to stop progressing their car soon so that they can focus on next year. Mercedes, the same. Maybe in like another month or so, but they're going to have to start thinking about next year too. Mercedes, coming on to them, they're going to struggle to have any sort of constructors fight this year on their hand. I think maybe third they will finish in the constructors. Maybe have a fight for second, but I don't see them. They're definitely not fighting for first. But I'd go as far as to say they're out of winning the constructors for this year. But if Lewis keeps getting the wins in and George keeps getting up there, then they could definitely finish in a decent position. It would be a big ask for Lewis. Even if he keeps winning, it's going to be a massive ask for him to get in any sort of championship winning role. Don't forget, there's 250 points still up for grabs. Like, all that takes is a few DNFs or crashes or temper tantrums, and this year's title is anyone's. Let's have a little look. He's only 78 points ahead of Lando. And Lewis is 149 behind. 149 points behind Lando. And that's 6th place. So, yeah. 78 points is the difference. And you've got Norris, Leclerc, and Piastri, and Sainz all within range of Max. So we're easily looking at a 3 or 4 way fight for the title, as long as that Red Bull hasn't magically found pace over the summer break. With his temper as well, there's plenty more possibilities for DNFs or more crashes. It's got real potential to be a great finish to the season, and it could arguably be one of the most exciting seasons since 2021. But time will tell. And this podcast will be irregular. Today's is a little longer than normal because we're doing a roundup of the season so far. But I will try to do a podcast after each race to sort of sum up where we are in the race. But for now, that's today's.